It's good to be here at CPAC this year. How y'all doing? We got a great panel for you guys today. We're going to start from the very beginning because we're going to talk about the mob, but we got to talk about where the mob comes from. So I spent 2 years covering the mob on college campuses. That's where it originated. This is where all they got, all the ammo, the professors, the indoctrination. Spencer, talk about that.
Well, yeah, I mean, if you look at everything we've seen in the streets over the last couple months, if we look at the cancel culture that's just pervading entertainment, Hollywood, things like that, you can trace it all back to one place, and that's college campuses. You know, you used to cover it. I've spent 5.5 years with Young America's Foundation going to more than 30 campuses with our speakers to see what happens when a conservative shows up. And you can't imagine what it's like until you do it. And it all goes back to sort of this core curriculum of the left, which are these ideas of intersectionality, of critical race theory, and it sets up students to feel like they're just always the victim and that any action is allowable in order to try to rectify that supposed injustice.
And then you got the conservative speakers that went on college campuses. In 2017, UC Berkeley, it was literally on fire.
With the Berkeley situation, watching the videos and stuff like that, you're wondering, how are these people getting away with this type of mentality, this violent, with not, just because somebody wanted to say that we want to save America or that we have another view, but to see that type of violence, to see gates thrown in the air or fire thrown in, that's, just to have that try to shut down another person's view of things, that's ridiculous.
Yeah. TW, everything really started to come to a head after the election of Donald Trump, where the leaders on the other side said, if you disagree with these guys, you got to get in their face. You got to harass their elected officials. You got to meet them at airports. When they're sitting down eating with their family, you got to come and show them that you mean business. And it was violent.
Absolutely. First of all, let me bring you greetings from Oklahoma, the state where Donald Trump won all 77 counties. And by the way, Matt Schlapp hadn't approved me to say this yet, but in case it hasn't been said, he is still the leader of this party. Make no doubt about it. Donald Trump is. But you're exactly right. The election of Donald Trump just exposed the left for who they really are. They're intolerant. They don't want you to have your own ideas. If you don't toe the line of exactly saying what they want you to say, think what they want you to think, then you're canceled. That's what they're about. Every one of us that's a black conservative can really speak to it because they've tried to keep us on that Democrat plantation for 250 years, but I tell you what, it ends. And I will also tell you something that Donald Trump said that I think the left has really been exposed for. He said something when he first got elected that stuck out to me. He said that they're not after me, they're after you. I'm just in the way.
That's
and we've seen that. Not only did they cancel the president of the United States on social media, but they've gone after conservative after conservative. And I will tell you what, until we unite and bring this party together, they're going to continue to do it. So I'll just say this, Lawrence, I appreciate you and what you do every day on Fox to bring home what it means to really be a conservative and what it means to expand the ideas of liberty, because that's what it's all about.
Thank you, I appreciate it. You talk about Fox, and I don't think you can talk about Fox without talking about the mainstream media as well. Because there has been narratives that have been put in the atmosphere, which is why Americans are so at each other's throat right now. It is a profitable business model now to have people at each other's throats. And I travel around the country during the election. I went to the Biden folks, I went to the Trump folks, I got to see everybody. And a lot of the issues, Wayne, most Americans agreed on. They agreed on it.
You're right.
But you wouldn't see that when you watch the media. Why is that?
Oh man, it's a money sport. It's a money sport. You got to put those cracker commercials on, and you got to put those swimsuit commercials on. Anything that is going to raise money for these networks, they got to get it on, but they have to make sure that we, amongst each other, are angry. They don't put a whole lot of people working together. You don't see a whole lot of CNN used to have a documentary, Being Black in America. They would show the poverty situations and this and that, but they rarely would show the success of Black Americans that was happening. It was always the bad side. And with the people that, with my listeners that call on the show, they're like, we look to the leadership, and the leadership can't get along. This thing has been happening for decades. The leadership can't get along. You have those individuals that are sitting up there, yeah, we work for you, we listen to you, but they don't go into the community to talk to us. Yeah. So you have a whole lot of attitudes festering in the communities, and they're fussing the same way that the leaders are fussing.
TW, I want to pick up on that because in order to understand the mob, you got to understand what's happening in the culture, what's happening in Black America. And I know you say that they want to keep folks in chains and all that, but I'm a reporter. I'm in Baltimore, south side of Chicago. I go to Dallas. I go to Philly. And when I talk to Black America, they're sick and tired of the politics that are happening, but they want that message from Republicans, from conservatives, for them. Now, they're traditionally conservative, but what can they do? Because in order to get rid of the mob, you got to provide an alternative. What is that alternative from the party?
Yeah, no, I appreciate the question. The first thing you have to understand is the mentality of the mob. How do we get to the mob? And there's one way you get to a mob, and I don't care if you're a mob on the left or you're a mob on the right or you're a mob in some, Middle Eastern country. The mob is established when there is a sense of hopelessness. And the left, what they do is they control the narrative and tell everybody you're hopeless. Even whether you're a minority, whether you're a white male, which has fallen out of favor with the left, it doesn't matter if you're a woman, if you're anybody other than an illegal alien, they have certain appreciation for that subgroup. But the reality is this: mobs happen when people have a sense of hopelessness. That's why people were burning down cities in around the country in the summer, because those Democrat mayors around the country offered no hope. The reason that people stormed the Capitol was because they felt hopeless because of a rigged election. That's where mobs happen. That's where it happens. And so how do you defeat the mob? How do you change the mob? Well, you have to understand who's created the most hopelessness around the world historically. Where has hopelessness come from around the world? It's come from government. Yes. Government has created hopelessness for millions and millions of people. And what's the left's answer to hopelessness? More government. It's a trick of the left. And because they've owned the narrative, because they have for too many years decided, who is a valued person and who isn't. Just imagine this, Lawrence. Just think about just a year ago. We're coming up on the 1-year anniversary when Dr. Fauci told us we only needed 2 weeks. If we lock down for 2 weeks, we're going to be fine. We're coming up on the anniversary of that. But just imagine a world where we had to wake up in the United States of America and wait to hear from our local mayor whether we were essential or non-essential. Mm-hmm. There's something fundamentally wrong with that. We as conservatives, we know that every single individual is essential. And the idea that we would allow a totalitarian government to tell us who's essential and who's not essential, it's scary. And the thing that scares me the most is that we didn't have enough conservatives standing up and saying, no, enough is enough. And so back to your question, how do you offer hope to a hopeless generation? You offer hope, number one, through faith. That's the first way that you offer hope. And then and number two is self-governance. And we saw this, and I don't want to take up too much time. I get real passionate about it. Having been the former Speaker of the House for the state of Oklahoma, we saw it firsthand how a government can start to unleash opportunity in people. But the reality is this: we have a finite time, and we have to, every single generation of Americans, we have to continue to expand what it means to be American and what liberty means in this country. But we have to fight for it. We can't allow it we can't allow it to languish. And we saw it in this last pandemic. We saw how the left will use any excuse for power. They will use any excuse that they can to garner power. We saw it during the pandemic when the left stood up and said that they are going to use exceptional government power to keep you in your home, to keep you fearful, and to keep you afraid of one another. I think enough is enough.
Yep. It wasn't just the left too. Some Republicans went along with it as
agree.
well
I totally
and
agree.
imposed lockdowns as well. But a lot of them they're not here to speak at this conference. Spencer, I want to go to you because TW touched on this, the pandemic, and I want to make the correlation to what happened over the summer because I think the hearts and minds of a lot of folks were in a different spot. They have seen the state abuse their power. They've seen the state tell people that they couldn't leave their home. They saw the state drag mothers away from playgrounds because they wanted to play with their kids outside. The way conservatives viewed the state was much different over this summer. We used to just have a mantra of just back the blue, and we do back the blue when the blue black backs the law. But when the state abuses its power, we're upset about that. So then we pivot during the summer. Sean Hannity was the first person to play the full video of what happened to George Floyd. And he talked about the abuses of the state. Talk about how we stand up righteously when the state abuses its power. But then when violence is in the street, we got to object to that as well.
Yeah, I mean, this summer saw a lot of things, I think, just laid bare in general about where things are at in this country, how people are feeling. My team and I were out in the streets of Washington, D.C. through a lot of the stuff this summer, documenting it, trying to figure out and talk to people, what do we see going on? And I think one of the things that obviously was not covered on most of the media networks was if you went to Black Lives Matter Plaza in D.C., just right outside the White House, you saw so many shockingly liberal women, white women, yelling in the faces of black police officers. Yeah. And it was just unreal, and you didn't see that anywhere else. And it showed you how much division there is and how much the left has convinced people that somehow being a police officer makes you a bad person, and that if you, as a white woman in your Lululemon leggings, stands up and starts screaming at them, you're somehow working towards racial justice. And it was just shocking to see a situation like that happen again and again. I think for our students especially, it made things very difficult for them as conservatives because they saw their communities rallying behind one group and telling them that if they ever supported the police, they are now just across the board evil and they should not be given a platform or any sort of a seat at the table to talk about these issues, which we should be talking about. We object to the left being obsessed with power, so we need to make sure that when there is power given to certain people, they're using it responsibly.
That's right.
And it was just so hard on campuses to have that conversation because those venues for the free and open exchange of ideas have just been destroyed by the left. And so it took a lot more work in order to be able to have people willing to sit down and have those tough conversations. If you can sit down and, like we are, have a conversation about what the role of police is, you can actually come to some common ground like you were saying earlier. But the problem is because the left doesn't want you to have a seat at the table, they'd rather flip the table, that just doesn't happen.
Spencer talks about, Wayne, about the white women protesters that got in the fight in the faces of the black officers and were screaming in their face, condemning them, just being nasty to them. But there's another element. I was on the ground in all these cities when the protests were happening. And there were some people that were on the ground that were peaceful. Yeah. They had righteous anger, right? But I saw a lot of white anarchists on the ground with Antifa yelling in their face when they told them, stop throwing stuff at the cops. One time I was there, and one of the ladies looked at the black folks and said, look, they're going to kill you anyway. So we got to address these anarchists that are on the ground, that are stirring the pot, and they have an agenda. Right. It's not for black lives. Right. It is not for justice for all. Right. It's so that they can have power. Talk about that.
And you know what? And I wish that a whole lot more people online saw or would agree with what you just said, because there was a situation where I think some Asian women were painting Black Lives Matter signs on buildings. And a couple of young black women were coming in, don't do that. We didn't do that. Why are you putting us up there and then you're making it look like we're doing that? Just like you said, there's a huge agenda out there, and it's for pitting us against each other. Somebody's getting paid. There's a whole, you can say there's a whole lot of money passing hands, and then those people on the top, they're laughing. They're laughing and they're seeing America tear at its fabric on the bottom within those communities that you said that you saw. And I just wish that a whole lot more people would be a whole lot more honest, just like with what you said. I wish that a lot of people would see those same things, come out and say, you know what? These people are trying to put us against each other. We have to stand up and say, no, we are America. We can fix this. There are people on the other side that want peace. We can talk to them. We can work this out. But we have to come to that conclusion.
You want to pick up on that, TW?
I would say this. We're talking about the role of the state in our lives. And, when I ran for state representative of Oklahoma, I was 27 years old. When I knocked on people's doors, I heard two things. Well, really three things. They said, fix the roads, fix the schools, and leave us alone. That's what I heard when I knocked doors. Yeah. And we saw this experiment over the last year. You have two worlds. You have a state like Florida and Texas versus states like California and New York.
Right.
A state that said, there's a problem that we have, we need more government. We need bigger government. We need government to fix the problem. Then you've got states like Florida and Texas who said, yes, government has a role in keeping people protected, but government cannot impede on the civil liberties of individuals. And we've seen the difference. And as a result, you're seeing this administration threaten to keep people from traveling to states like Florida, right? The left doesn't want you to see what freedom looks like because light always outshines darkness, and it exposes darkness for what it is. And that's why it's so important that we as conservatives, that we're vocal and we tell our story. It's not enough just to be right. Yes, we're right on taxes, we're right on life, we're right on the Constitution, we're right on national defense. It's not enough to just be right. You have to go tell your story. In your classroom, you have to tell your story. On your job, you have to tell your story because we're right on the issues.
And you know what? Don't think that people won't listen. Herman Cain told me during an interview one time, Wayne, just because somebody doesn't accept what you say the first time doesn't mean that you stop telling your message. Yeah. Everybody's not going to accept what you say. Don't get mad. Move on. Yeah. Somebody's going to hear you, and they might not even come back during that same day, but they might come back a little and keep on living your conservative lives too. If there's something that I learned in church a long time ago, is that if you live a Christian life and you live it to the fullest and you show people that God is within you, that draws people to you. Yeah. So if you have you live your conservative life and you do it the right way, God's gonna bless you. Somebody's gonna be like, I want what that person got. Yeah. So then you just keep on talking, keep on spreading conservatism. Again, don't get mad because I don't want to hear it. Don't worry about that. Because somebody else way in the back, I want to hear what that person got to say.
Yeah, that's true. I'm a preacher's kid, so I can just say amen.
All right.
So, Spencer, you can't talk about the mob without talking about the mob destruction of business, right? And we had two mobs over the summer. We had the mob of the state that decided that they were going to literally say businesses could not open. And then you had the mob of the violence that decided that they were going to set the businesses on fire. We were doing great when it comes to the economy. Black women under Donald Trump had the number one businesses, black small businesses, black women, right? Led the way. What are your thoughts on the mob of the state and the mob of the violence?
Well, the mob of the state showed just how much damage government that sees an opportunity to make a power grab and takes it can do in a very small amount of time. I mean, you can look, we mentioned states like New York and California where they were very effective at wielding that power and they didn't follow the science at all. I mean, if you look at the science across the board right now, we could have so much more open, we could have kids back in school, we could have college campuses, students getting back together into that community, but instead they saw the opportunity to take this power, and on that point, what scares me is now they realize how easy it is to do that.
Yeah.
We did not put up, I don't think, enough of a fight when it comes to following the science, and now they realize all it takes, a virus, with scientific backing that you all of a sudden just ignore the science on, we'll still go along with it. Yeah. So that's what scares me about the mob of the state and how they realize they can wield that power. Then at the same time, just out of example, Washington, D.C., where I live, you have Mayor Bowser shutting down the city, getting rid of indoor dining, doing all these ridiculous things. And then you have the violence breakout.
Yep.
And so all these businesses that weren't even making an income because they weren't open or able to do anything now also don't have a business to reopen because it's either been firebombed, the windows have been shattered out, everything has just been destroyed and taken from these people. That happened not just in D.C., that happened back home in Minneapolis, where a number of people I know had their businesses destroyed by rioters, excuse me. And you just see how it was sort of a 1-2 punch that set these businesses back. And you have all these small, mom and pop businesses, all these minority-owned businesses that are now looking at, okay, even if we can reopen based on CDC guidelines or Dr. Fauci finally deciding that we can actually follow the science, they don't have anything to reopen.
Wow. Wayne, the state didn't just say close down. They allowed that to happen. And then they allowed the businesses to be burned as well. But the state, after telling us all of this, decided they weren't going to give money to these businesses to repair.
Just the last year, just watching it happen to these businesses, and I felt bad for them, as we all felt bad for them, because so many people were like getting on TV and they were letting people know they're killing what I destroyed. And then on top of that, the mob came and destroyed what the government didn't destroy. The mobs came and did it destroy. To watch the money come, and then some of the people said that they didn't even get any money. I was sitting in, I'm trying to figure out, and I'm not backing any of the mob, period. But you know what I'm going to say? What do you expect when you shut down people? What do you expect when you take people's livelihood away that have had businesses for 40 and 50 years, mom and pop shops?
Yeah.
And then you give them $600 to last for about 5 months. or you put police in front of their businesses so they can, what do these state governments think that people are going to do? America's spirit has always been to fight back.
Yeah.
It's always been to fight back and stand up for liberty. I feel sorry for all of those businesses, and I pray that a lot of those businesses come back. I don't know if they're going to come back.
Yeah.
I don't know if they're going to come back. But I tell you this, there's a whole lot of American spirit out there that's not going to quit.
Yeah.
They aren't going to quit, and they aren't going to run away. And that's what I think is more scary to a whole lot of these government officials, because they're seeing a whole lot of people saying, you're not going to put me down. I'm going to stand up for my rights.
Yeah. That's good stuff. That's good stuff. TW, I can go off on the Democrats all day, but this is what I expect from them.
Yeah.
What about the Republicans? Can we talk about Republicans? Is that fair? Is that fair? Is that fair?
Yeah.
What about the Republicans that allowed this to happen?
Yep.
They'll give a fiery speech on the floor. They'll tell you during election time they're fighting for you. They'll send you a mailer and all that. But when it came down to it, some Republican states, some Republican areas allowed this to happen. Will there be consequences?
There absolutely will be consequences. Never underestimate the power of the American people. The American people are not stupid. And I think that's one of the things that the left picks up on, that they miss so often. The reality is we are living in a time in our country where individual liberty is under attack like never before. I mentioned before the tale of two cities, the tale of two types of states, California and Florida, and I put Oklahoma in there in many regards, versus states like New York and California. It was an experiment. Does liberty, do free markets, does capitalism, does it still work during a pandemic? Can it still survive during a global pandemic? Well, Florida and the state of Texas say that it can. It actually can. It can thrive. It can actually thrive. I'm a banker. We had one of the best years that we've ever had in our business because our state is having such a great year in Oklahoma. The reason it works is because our principles that our founding fathers found, they still work. But when we talk about how do you push back against the state, number one, we as conservatives, we've got to do a better job of electing people at every level of government. We need people running on the school board. We need people running in city elections. And we need to hold Republicans accountable who don't toe the line for freedom, free markets, and capitalism. And maybe most importantly, we've got to protect our Second Amendment rights, because it all starts right there with the Second Amendment.
That's good stuff. I got to ask you, I don't want to talk about this too long, but we got to address what happened at the Capitol. Because some people decided to disgrace the movement by storming the Capitol. And when I'm in the airport, when I'm talking in communities, they tell me they're upset at the people that stormed the Capitol is because they gave the liberal media credibility in that moment. It was everything that they had described the Trump and the MAGA movement before it even ever happened as. And the majority of people, they don't believe in that. They don't believe in assaulting cops at the Capitol, storming the Capitol, saying hang Mike Pence. They don't believe that. And so there was a mourning period because they have always been painted that way. What would you say to the people in this audience that feel just like that? That's you, Wayne. That's you.
Look, you're talking to somebody that covered it and got kicked off YouTube for covering it. I don't know, man. I'm serious. I don't know. I mean, I'll go back to what I said before. There's a lot of people there. There's a lot of people there. The Antifa was there. BLM was there. MAGA people were there.
Yeah.
Everybody was there. And if Joe Biden wants to talk unity, there was unity there on that day because America is sick and tired of being pushed down. And we're sorry for, a lot of people are sorry for what happened there. But in watching the individuals do those things and whatnot, all I can say is somebody, I really don't know. There's so many emotions with that.
Well, I'll tell you.
There's so many emotions with that, Lawrence.
I'll tell you what it is, and Spencer, I'll let you pick up on this. During the summer, I saw people that were peaceful, and then you saw people that were violent at night. I condemned it, and I said it was wrong. And then I saw people that peacefully protested. The president came and spoke to them, and then there were some knuckleheads decided that they were going to storm the Capitol. And I condemned that. I guess what I'm saying is maybe we're more alike than we give ourselves credit for.
Yeah.
Maybe, just maybe, in every movement, there are bad apples, and there are people that stand when their liberties, or they feel like their liberties, aren't being taken seriously. So maybe, just maybe, we should start looking at each other as Americans, and when there is disagreements, we should duke it out intellectually. Go ahead, I'll let you pick up.
Round of applause for that for sure. No, you're exactly right. There are bad apples on either side, and this is something we see when we go to college campuses all the time. You know, anytime we show up on a liberal campus, there's bound to be opposition. And a lot of times that opposition is peaceful. There's a First Amendment zone. Our same right that allows conservatives to speak on that campus allows the liberal students to protest peacefully and following the guidelines outside, and that is totally fine with us. We invite everybody who disagrees to come in. We give them first preference to ask a question of our speaker. There's nothing wrong with that lively and robust free exchange of ideas. That's what we need to have. But then you do have these groups on both sides, like you pointed out, where whether it's Antifa at Berkeley or somebody somewhere else, they mess up the whole system and this idea that, again, we should all be able to come together and say we are either in a country, Americans first, or on a college campus, we're all students here working towards this same goal of learning and hearing new ideas and broadening our horizons. And that just gets completely thrown to the side whenever somebody decides to choose violence, physical violence, over, like you were saying, duking it out intellectually, which is what college should be. That's why you go, is to have these hard discussions, and the left has just completely taken that away.
TW, I cannot end this panel without giving the folks out there a call to action, right? We just can't talk about the mob, the violence. We can't talk about the GOP. We just cannot talk about it without sending them out there to do something about it. What is your message to them?
My message to conservatives today is, number one, do not buy the left's message of identity politics. This country was founded on the idea of the individual. Yes, we can collectively come together and form a government that protects people, that protects liberty, but the idea that we are all based upon these individual categories and demographics, who stormed the Capitol, who didn't storm the Capitol, who was it that was rioting this summer? It was individuals, and those individuals need to be held accountable, and they should be. And the reason is, when you buy into this idea of identity politics, the reason it creates a challenge is because all of a sudden America, you start buying into the idea of the left's idea that America is systemically racist. Now, you've heard that. How many of you have heard that before? Systemically racist. Well, let me tell you today, America is not systemically racist. America is the land of systemic opportunity. And it is a place for systemic opportunity for any man, any woman, any gender, any sex, any individual who wants to work hard, who wants to save, and who wants to give back to their community. That's who we are, and that's our message as conservatives. So my message to conservatives today is, don't buy into the idea of identity politics. We're better than that, and don't buy into the idea that there's a civil war in our party. There's no civil war here. We are united. Now, we're not like the Democrats. We're not going to think like they do. We don't line up all together in a single file line and do exactly what we're told from people at the top. That's not who we are. We're going to have a debate 4 years from now about who our nominee is. But right now, we are a united party standing against Joe Biden and the radical left who's trying to turn us into a socialist country. That's who we are.
And you know what? And I think that you also have to add on to that is what you said earlier, and I said all the time on my radio show. You have to get into community politics. You have to get into local elections. A lot of Democrats are running these neighborhoods and communities, and when you come out of your door, you be like, well, how did that happen? Well, when did that get put there? Well, you have to start going to these meetings. And if you can't go by yourself, go in a group. As a matter of fact, put y'all's names up to run on to the community politics. That's how you start taking back the state. Because a whole lot of these issues with these machines and stuff, it didn't happen in D.C., it happened in the state. And a whole lot of these Democrats pushed a whole lot of this machines and stuff. And then when we look at it, well, how did that happen? Like I said, community politics. I know it's not sexy. You know, you won't be called state senator or whatnot, but that's where the battle lies, is in the community. Yeah. You fix the community, you fix the neighborhood, the state follows, then the government follows, but you really got to start at home in your neighborhoods.
It's true. Spencer, what's your call to action?
Yeah, well, we were talking about, the country in general, but I want to speak specifically to students both here and those who are watching at home or wherever. We talked about how it feels to be hopeless and alone. And I think, and I know from working with them, so many conservatives, whether it's high school or college, feel completely isolated and alone, like they're the only people who believe in the things that we believe in. And I hope that through gatherings like CPAC and watching this kind of thing, you realize that you are not alone. You are not some sort of extremist to believe in the free market or to believe that all people are created equal. This is your chance to decide to stand up and be bold advocates for these ideas. And when you do that, you have rooms full of people just like this who will back you up, who will defend you in court, and who will make sure you get covered on TV or wherever else radio it may be. You are not alone, and it's worth standing up and fighting for these ideas, no matter what the left calls you or tells you. And like you were saying, even though they might be screaming at you today on campus, they're hearing what you're saying and the ideas that you're proposing. Right. Those are going to stick with them, and this is the time in their life where you can actually change their mind.
Amen. I'll leave you with this, and I say this every year. My value system came from the home. The history that was taught to me. I'll fight like Frederick Douglass. I'll build like Booker T. Washington. And when it comes down to defend myself, I'll do it like here at Tubman. Thank you so much for having me.